All right. Hi, everybody. We are just going to give everyone a few minutes to trickle in, and we're going to kick off with today's webinar. So just stay tuned for a little while longer. While we are waiting, we do have a poll in the chat. Curious to get your perspectives. The question is, what percentage of your merchants require manual review at your company? So curious to get a few perspectives from around the group today ahead of the kickoff, and we'll review that shortly. All right, excellent. I see a good number of people jumping in. Wait one more minute and we'll get going. All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Danny Hakimian. I am the CEO and founder of TrueBiz. For those of you who don't know, we provide automated risk detection on merchants. So we help merchant acquirers onboard, underwrite, and monitor their merchants faster with an instant analysis of their internet footprint. Today's conversation is really about something I think every risk and onboarding team is dealing with right now. That tension between how do you move quickly while at the same time staying safe and compliant. I think on one side of this equation, we see a lot of growth in commercial teams who want faster approvals, a better merchant experience. And on the other side, we see risk and compliance often dealing with more fraud, more complexity, and higher expectations from regulators, from card networks, and partner banks. And what we often see is really that friction causing manual reviews to pile up, analysts often getting stretched thin, and decisions either being inaccurate or ending up slowing down. So today's conversation with three experts we have on the webinar today is really going to try be as kind of practical and as detailed as possible. We're going to talk about three high-level areas of this problem today. So the first is really where we're going to explore where is onboarding and underwriting really breaking down today, where are we seeing kind of friction and challenges in that process? What and how should it actually be automated? And also what shouldn't be automated? What do we still want human intelligence around? And then finally, we're gonna cascade and segue into how teams are evolving, how the role of the underwriter and the risk analyst is evolving to be able to safely scale these teams without losing control. So before getting into it, I am going to hand over to today's panelists to a brief introduction to themselves, and then we're going to jump in. So Jackie, I'll tag you in first. Oh, no, unmuted. All right. While we're working out Jackie's mic, Nicole, you want to kick off with the intro?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Frayn. I am the head of risk compliance and underwriting at Paymend. I'm very new. I just celebrated my 1 month here. So at Paymend, we focus on card revenue in a high risk space, helping online merchants turn failed payments into completed transactions. So a lot of what I do today sits at the intersection of growth and risk control. Most of my focus is making sure that we're not just onboarding merchants quickly, but boarding the right merchants in a way that performs long term. My background spans in underwriting, credit, and payments risk. I spent a large part of my career at PaySafe. I then managed an $18 billion check cashing portfolio for Walmart for a company called Certegy. I then built out a risk function at Revel Systems as they became a PayFac with Worldpay, and then they were later acquired by Shift4. And then most recently, prior to Paymend, I led the underwriting team at Kurv. So Mike, great to see you again, and excited to be here, and thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. Jackie, I think we've got the mic problem solved, so I'll tag you in next.
Thank you. Yep, Jackie Hite. I'm the product leader for CDD risk and compliance at Worldpay. I've been here for about 12 years now. Before I was in product, I was the manager of US and Canada underwriting. So I've seen lots of things, done lots of things, went from using the tools to managing the tools. So I have the entirety of our underwriting for our global entities. And then I have transaction monitoring as well. We do over 70 billion transactions per year. And then I have like sanction screening and list screening. So it is quite a wild landscape, but it is super fun to have all of this and work with everybody.
Right. Thank you, Jackie. And Mike, to close out the intros, over to you.
Yeah, Mike Snyder. I'm a specialized risk manager at Kurv. I've been with the company for 18 years. A lot of that was as a relationship manager for our third-party channel. And then recently, last couple of years, I moved over to the underwriting side, and I manage a specialized team of underwriters who look at some of the more challenging merchant types.
All right. Thank you for the intro, Mike. So to jump into our first section, we're going to talk a little bit about the current state of onboarding and underwriting today and where the group here really sees friction kind of occurring. So Jackie, I'll tag you in kind of first on this one. I think it'd be interesting to get a view from you on where do you see friction really showing up in the onboarding process today?
Yeah, so we see a good bit of friction. So we're always trying to manage that balance of how much information do you ask for, how much do you leave off, like how many fields are on the application itself. So coming from a risk background, I obviously want to ask as many questions as possible, but you don't want to deter somebody from filling out your application. 15 minutes for an app, not so bad. 3 hours to fill out an app, that would probably make people walk away. So for us, just getting accurate information can be a struggle, especially for startup businesses. A lot of times they may not know what their volumes are going to be. So they put all their hopes and dreams on the paper, and then that makes it hard for the underwriting team because there's no proof that they will be doing that. So then that can kick out for different reviews. So for us, it's kind of managing, what information coming in. Because to a degree, it doesn't matter how good your tools are if the information that is coming in is dirty or is wrong, inaccurate, either on purpose or on accident. That can make it hard for the teams because it'll kick out for manual review. So we're always looking for the next best thing. How can we, utilize different tools to get more information without putting that burden on the merchant or the sales rep? We want sales to be focused on what they do best, which is selling. So the better tools we have to find the information, the less the burden is on the merchant and sales.
Nicole, from your perspective, over the kind of the places and the processes you've seen, where are you generally seeing kind of the friction really enter into the process and break down?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jackie said. And, I think that one of the main drivers in friction is and onboarding is the misalignment between what sales is submitting versus what the business actually is. Because if sales and risk aren't aligned on what a good merchant looks like, then onboarding will always break. So that means like uncompleted underwriting packages, unclear billing models, mismatched URLs, claiming that they're selling apples at a food truck, but requesting a gateway, but then wanting a certain MCC. And then you look at the URL and then they're selling like lifetime insurance and timeshare exit. So just lack of transparency, not completed underwriting packages. It's a big friction point for us.
Yeah, Mike, maybe also sort of tagging you in here. How do you think about that, the difference between what you're collecting from the merchant themselves versus what you can actively research and balancing that friction there?
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, I mean, to the group, but yeah, if you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I just as far as onboarding the merchant, just kind of what Nicole had mentioned, getting complete packages when they're submitted, and also when underwriting is requesting items, sometimes you get responses that aren't clear or piecemealed, and it can delay the underwriting process.
Understood. Just one piece of housekeeping I've been told to remind everybody on. There is a Q&A panel in the Zoom section. So if there are any questions you want us to dig into further, please feel free to submit those there, and we'll get to them through the conversation. But maybe kind of segueing back to the conversation around friction in onboarding. Obviously, there's a big theme and trend across industries, even outside of payments, around automation today. Where are you generally seeing the analysts currently spending most of their time? So there's still in every shop today a degree of automation that is going on. But from your perspectives, where is most of that analyst energy and intelligence currently being placed?
For us, it's mostly startups because there's just not a lot of information out there. And then we get a ton of fraud. So for us, the analysts tend to spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what the business is doing. And, is this really the person that they claim to be? Are they really doing what they're claiming to be for their business? And for me personally, I always have a morbid curiosity. So if I see that the merchant is doing something crazy, that makes me want to dig in more. So you can always go into different things like their websites, their social media, but we really love TrueBiz because they have the link analysis. So a lot of times we'll get kind of rings of crime that will come in. So we'll have, multiple businesses submit, or maybe they have it and they submit it under their cousin or something, and they just keep changing things. So they'll shut down one website, they'll open up another. So maybe you see, the website's only been established for a few days, but it's already having so much volume on here. How is that possible? Is this fraud? Is this a scam? Do we have to worry about chargebacks? Do we have to worry about money laundering? So then it becomes not just, is this fraud? It's okay, now what type of fraud are we dealing with? Is this a one-off? Is this one company? Or is this something that's a lot bigger? Do we have to worry about a few transactions, or do we have to worry about, hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, and it just depends because, like I said, those fraud rings can become really prevalent, and the different types will come up. You'll see different trends come and go. You'll see a lot that's, tied to money laundering or like human trafficking. That's a big problem. If you see a lot of different types of businesses come in for like car washes or massage parlors, or like they're claiming to sell hair or eyelashes, but you start digging into it and then you see on their Instagram, oh, actually, yeah, you're a gas station, but you're selling guns to Russia. So then it becomes like this fun, kind of like mystery detective thing. But then you have to kind of cut yourself off because, you could spend 2-3 hours digging into all of this information. So now we kind of see a shift on what can we automate? Can we automate a lot of this research? And we're seeing this like emergence of AI in the industry. And so we're kind of leaning on different companies like TrueBiz to find all of this information for us and determine if it's relevant to the business or not, and if we need to care about it.
Excellent. Nicole, Mike, anything to add kind of from your perspectives on where analysts are spending a lot of time digging the information out?
Yeah, just like across the board, like with unclear and inconsistent like merchant data, the analysts then turn into, they're not just underwriting, they're like acting as investigators, because you can have all this automation, check all these things, but like you still have to make sure that the same legal name is the same on that processing statement, on the bank statement, on the application, it's matching what they're selling. And so that's really where they start acting as investigators. And like what Jackie said, you go down this like rabbit hole because then you discover then, oh, wow, you're selling guns in Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. It's more than just underwriting, you're underwriting the merchant and looking at, the exposure and things like that on the merchant. But most importantly, I think most people are spending their time on trying to figure out if this is a legitimate merchant or not. And the team that I manage, the specialized team, they spend a lot of time, whether it's doing, using different verification tools, bank verification, facial verifications, or using TrueBiz, looking for any similarities, any commonalities between these potential fraudulent accounts. I would say a lot of the time is spent just trying to figure out, like, is this a legitimate business? And then once you figure that out, then you can really start underwriting and decisioning the application. But you got to figure out if it's legit first or not.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in that it almost breaks down into three components. One is, does the business actually exist? And if it does, is it a real business you can or you want to work with? I'm curious, as you think about this process, are there signals or aspects that are harder to verify or hardest to verify in that process? Like, where are you seeing the industry or team struggle in that verification process?
It seems that like when it's a startup business, it's really hard to verify, especially if they've been in business for less than 3 months. It's really hard to verify if they're online too, card not present, online merchants. We see this a ton of them selling like online clothes, but like then they'll send you fake fulfillment, fake drop shipping agreements. But it really seems like it's the in that high risk space of the merchants that are startups less than 3 months, can't really see anything, can't see foot traffic yet on TrueBiz. There's no online presence really, so that's when it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. We also have a difficult time with even card present merchants that where you can't locate them. They may be a new business, but they're card present, and maybe you can't find them on Google Maps. And sometimes your Google Maps images that you're using are outdated, right? So you're trying to use any tool you have to see if this is an actual business here at this address. And we do see fraud. Specifically, we see a lot of EBT fraud where it's not even a legitimate business, right? They're trying to, you think it's a convenience store, but it's really not. So, trying to make that judgment on those type of applications can be difficult.
Sure. And then Jackie, kind of segueing from that, the difficulty of some of those nuanced cases, whether it's new businesses or higher risk businesses, how do you think about consistency in the process? Because obviously, if you're going from a semi-automated or manual process, you already have a bit of inconsistency between individual analysts. But how do you think about trying to scale that process up in a more automated manner?
Funny you should mention that. That is one of the topics that is a hot button with my teams. So you're always going to have some level of bias because each person may have their own specialty. For example, I tend to specialize in nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals and whatnot. It's just something that I'm interested in. But you may have somebody that's more with human trafficking or, like guns and ammo and whatnot. So then, it's almost like they start looking for these things. So it's just like you have in your mind already that it is fraud. So you're trying to prove that fraud. But then you're like, okay, well, how do you automate this? Because the process itself can be very inconsistent because there's just so much that you may need to check based off of what the merchant is giving you or not giving you. Like if they're a startup, maybe they're selling t-shirts and you find them on Google and it's a residential address. Well, yeah, anybody can sell t-shirts out of their garage. So they can send you a picture of a box of t-shirts and you're just like, okay, well, how can I say no to that? And then sometimes you may think that, oh, I know this business is doing something for sure. I just can't prove it. So you kind of will go outside of that process to see what you can find. So then we talk about, how can we bring AI in to find these things for us? And then how do we prevent bias from that as well? Because, obviously whatever models that you have into that could have their own bias. And then obviously you have to be careful about different things. So for example, if you have like in the US, we have the HICA list, which is the high risk list of zip codes. So certain zip codes may have high risk for money laundering, high risk for fraud. But a lot of times those zip codes end up being in poorer areas. So you want to make sure that your model is adjusting for that risk, but you have to weigh that against, any behavioral, reputational risk that you may bring to your business. Because what if somebody says, oh yeah, Worldpay is targeting against lower socioeconomic statuses. They're targeting against elderly. They're targeting against all of these other types of vulnerable populations. And you kind of have to manage that balance of, we have to recognize that there is a certain level of risk because these vulnerable populations are being targeted for fraud. Like I had a guy that was an elderly man. He had a antique store and he ended up on the match list, the MasterCard naughty list, if you will, because this man told him, oh yeah, if you let me sell my jewelry here, I'll give you 10%, but you have to open up the account for me because I'm not a U.S. resident. I'm not allowed to sell here. I'm here, illegally. So can you open up this account for me? And then I'll give you 10%. And he was just like, oh yeah, he's such a sweet guy. Let me do it for him. And then wham, he ends up on the match list because he wasn't selling necklaces. He was selling drugs. So this poor elderly man now is on this list that he never thought he would be on because he had no idea of anything. So you may even have somebody who's trying to do what they think is the right thing, and they don't know that something is happening. So it just really is situational, what it is. But like I said, the more we can automate, the better. So companies like TrueBiz can help us out by finding all of those ties to that. So if the guy had looked up the website, dropped it in there, he could have seen all the ties to it, not just the website, the one website the guy was showing him, or like their social media. A lot of people will put stuff on Instagram that you wouldn't believe. So a lot of times we can just find it there, but that is really time consuming. So again, we look at how can we utilize AI, because AI can take, multiple websites, or they can look through 300 pages and dive in all of these terms and conditions, and maybe on the 407th page, 6 minutes down into it, you have, boom, there's that illegal or prohibited product. And that would have taken a human hours to find, or maybe they would have given up before then. So, but then, like I said, for your models, you have to figure out, how can we do this quickly? How can we make this cost effective? And, how can we address bias on both sides?
Great. I mean, I think the challenge of automation, or like the problem with moving from like a semi-automated to fully automated solution, is often those edge cases of inconsistency. And often it's like, how do you actually replicate what is often like a gut check of a very good analyst to say, like, I kind of know something is up. If you've done enough of these, you can kind of eyeball it, and maybe you can't always articulate it, but something isn't right. And it becomes a bit of a challenge to say, like, how do you put a package together to then push back on sales, push back on growth, to say this is why it's wrong. I'm curious again, Nicole, you mentioned at the top of the session, this sort of balance between sales and risk. How have you found the best way of aligning those goals and those teams on making sure like the friction at onboarding is acceptable for both of those parties to do what they need to do?
Yeah, I think communication was what really helped me at Kurv. So you have direct, you have inside, you have third party, all different channels bringing in revenue. So making sure that the sales team understands what underwriting really needs, like what is a complete underwriting package, getting them to kind of agree, like, okay, if you guys have a URL, feel free to plug it in and take a look at it. If it doesn't work, don't submit the package. If you're not providing the 3 months of processing statements, or you notice it's screenshots, but just getting them to align and getting them to, and then somehow like getting them to train them as well. And we had great success at Kurv. I know Mike has taken over there. But yeah, it's all about like alignment and communication, and then just making it a standard in your department that this is what we require up front, working with, like, that's where I'm at Paymend right now, working with the sales folks. So we're all high risk. Everything is pretty much subscription. And so kind of getting sales realigned now. Like, guys, we can't probably do a lot of these subscription merchants. And so explaining to them why we can't, what's prohibited, what's not prohibited. And so just alignment.
Just an additional topic to kind of expand on the onboarding side. From the group here, how do you think about sort of progressively onboarding or progressively underwriting the merchants that are coming through the funnel? So there's obviously a limit in terms of time and friction that can be placed at the onboarding phase. How do you think about working with risks and other parts of the journey to say, we're going to create further thresholds and gates later in the journey to get better sense of what this merchant is doing and reduce the risk to the business?
Oh yeah, I think that is absolutely critical, because if you accept applications, period, you're going to have fraud at some point. So it's not just how do we prevent fraud, that is obviously very important, but it's when fraud happens, now what do we do? So you always have to have a system of checks and balances. And then we have something we call critical checks versus non-critical checks. So you're never going to eliminate friction, but it is important to reduce friction and streamline it as much as possible. So maybe they pass the critical checks up front, and then you have it pass on, they can process, or maybe you put them on a funds hold or something. And then for us, like the websites, a lot of our fraud, like a huge majority of our fraud, happens within the first 90 days. So what happens in the underwriting phase is just, what they're able to see at that time. They don't have a crystal ball. They can't see what happens in the future. And a lot of times the business will say, especially if they're up to no good, they may say, okay, well, nobody's looking at me anymore. I've made it through underwriting. Now I can change my website. Now I can change this. And now I can really start processing the way that I want to. So underwriting may have approved them for something, and then they may do something else entirely. So it's important to kind of recheck those at certain intervals based on, whatever risk you have. So I'm a big fan of data. I think your data should be able to kind of feed where you go. So you can't just check everybody for everything, right? So there's always that tricky balance of how do we take a risk-based approach, not solve for edge cases. Obviously, your edge cases are going to happen from time to time. So you should be solving for the majority as much as possible. And then if the edge cases themselves are extremely risky, then you can check them. But it's kind of hard to have a pulse on absolutely everything all the time. That's why it's good. Like for us, we have a good transaction monitoring team and transaction monitoring tools so that we can see if merchants are doing specific transactions, if there's any flags for them, they can review those. So even though we've approved you, that doesn't mean the checks are over.
Just to touch on that, it's important for us, for the underwriting side of the house to have a good line of communication with the risk side of the house, right? So if you see something as an underwriter, you're gonna decision a merchant, and you have concerns, something about that merchant that is concerning to you, but you're going to decision that merchant. We are communicating that to risk, right? Whether some sort of note for them to see on that account so that they know too, kind of like Jackie said, in those first 90 days, especially, hey, let's just keep an eye on this, right? This, so it's important to have underwriting and risk on the same page, because sometimes they're not, and they need to be. So we try to strive for that at Kurv. Open line of communication with merchants. We also do quarterly reviews between the teams to make sure we're all on the same page.
So maybe just trying to kind of put a bow on this initial section on where onboarding really breaks. It sounds like from the group here, there's still a degree of like inconsistency that is causing issues to break. There's always this balance between the depth of information you're capturing and the level of friction you're able to put to get the application through. Maybe at a high level, how does the group kind of think about what the ideal onboarding process looks like? What is the good or best in class state in your mind?
Ideally, 100% get auto approved.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
we never have to look at them. I mean, honestly, ideally. Honestly, you get a good percentage of deals that get auto decision, they get auto approved, and then the ones that don't, we can the tools that we have, TrueBiz, some of our other vendors are so good that we can make a decision within a snap of a finger and move on with that merchant. That's the ideal world. And sometimes it does play out like that. Sometimes you can make a quick decision. I know I've mentioned TrueBiz a few times, but TrueBiz is so helpful. Jackie mentioned Nutra merchants. Our specialized team, we see a lot of those type of, some people call them direct marketing merchants, but they're TrueBiz has been super helpful with that. Ideally, the deals that aren't automated, these tools we have like TrueBiz are so good that it lets us make our decisions, quickly.
I think picking up on that, I think this kind of nice casual segue into the kind of the second section we had in mind on how do you think about what can and should be automated versus what you still actually want human intelligence around. So yeah, I think there's a question in the chat from Lindsay, which I think is a really good kind of segue into this topic. Or what is the favorite thing that you've automated? Although maybe you were previously doing manually, that's made the biggest difference in the time you're spending underwriting accounts.
I'll take that one. Yeah, so for us, we've kind of introduced not just auto approval, but auto decline as well. And it's something that we're working on. So we actually use what we call liveness ID and V checks. So what that is the person will have to take either their smartphone or like a camera. They'll have to hold up a picture of their ID, not picture of their ID, their actual ID, sorry. It will kick it out if it's a picture. It'll say, we need a real one here. And then it'll do a liveness check, so a selfie check, if you will. So it'll see, is the person moving? Are they real? Is there a filter? Is there an injection into the feed, interrupting the feed to where they're pretending this is a live video, but it's not really a live video? So that is something that, we've looked at. We had a specific channel that had like SEO marketing. So if you go on Google, type in, Worldpay, type in whatever, it'll land them there. So we implemented that check for that line of business. They have right around 40% fraudulent submissions, and that knocked their fraud submissions almost down to zero overnight. So just implementing that single check was really good for us. So we kind of do it from a waterfall approach. So we check to see if you're even a real person first, and if you have stolen somebody's identity, and then that knocks out a huge amount of fraud. Because most of the time, sometimes the fraudsters will still attempt it, but most of the time they just walk away. They're like, no, I'm not even going to bother anymore. So that has cut down on a lot of noise for us. So it's always good to see what we want to review, what we don't. So to answer that question is, I don't want to see the easy deals and I don't want to see the bad deals. So ideally, it would auto approve everything that's clean and then auto decline everything that we know is fraud, we know is a prohibited merchant, we know is a prohibited MCC, or the risk exposure is too high. Like maybe you have poor credit and you're a solar panel business, which is super high risk from a credit standpoint. So maybe it can auto decline all of those for us. And then our sweet spot would be, okay, maybe we have some high regulatory items that we need to review, like card not present pharmacies, card not present tobacco, or firearms. That way we can focus on the ones that, like, Visa, MasterCard have additional regulations that we have to register them for or something. So there will always be like a true like human in the loop though. So even for those like that are auto approved or auto declined, maybe you can have a QAer that would go in periodically and just, check to make sure everything's working appropriately. But ideally, the good ones and the bad ones, kick them out. We only want to see ones that we have to do work on.
Just to touch on that. For us, we run a lot of the similar controls as far as, the facial identification and things like that. And we have the ability within our system to, toggle what we want to do based on where the submission may be coming from. So, you may have your trusted sources who are submitting applications. So we have the ability, if we want, to let the deal come in without any of these, verifications, which is very useful for us because, there's, when you identify where your applications are coming from, it can help you when you're underwriting the application. It's good to know that. And we can set up parameters so that, if an application is coming in from this source, we know what kind of business they send, and then we can turn on different verifications based on that. So the ability for us to do that is huge, and it really helps streamline the application process.
That's a really good one. I agree there. It's important for being able to be agile in your review process. So if you start to see fraud pop up in one area that you're not used to, maybe you can turn on some different workflows, some different checks over there. And then as it ebbs and flows, you can kind of change that. So I think that is also a critical piece of it, is being able to manage your workflow quickly and make changes necessary as quickly as possible. For example, when COVID happened, a lot of merchants were forced into card not present that previously hadn't. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses were shut down, or they just couldn't remain open because their facility they weren't allowed to process, right? A lot of mom and pop restaurants ended up losing their facilities. And then for us, we had to be able to change our rules very quickly, because normally we have a lot of risk in fraud and not a whole lot in the credit area. And then all of a sudden that flipped completely. We were still getting fraud, but then all of a sudden our credit exposure just went out the window. So being able to be very agile and change your process at the drop of a hat, if you need to, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. When COVID happened, I remember During at PaySafe, we had merchants that, were having year-long gym memberships. They weren't fulfilling that. We would have people fulfilling orders for custom bikes and they were never shipping out. You would then have people who are just trying to get by. So they're selling like, miscellaneous like COVID equipment or like gear that wasn't related to their business. But a lot of the stuff happened with like the subscriptions. So being able to like adjust to that, but it was wild times when COVID hit. But kind of just back to like what do you automate versus like review? I think just like what do you trust basic for automation? I think it's just like ID, entity verification, bank account, having TrueBiz to run URL, just basic consistency checks because everything costs money. So every merchant you underwrite has a cost attached to it. So you can end up with really expensive onboarding processes that don't actually improve your decisions if you're not adapting to those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the simple rule is you can reject everybody and have no business, and you can approve everybody and have no business as well. So
Yep.
somewhere in between the two is probably where the golden setting lies. Sort of picking up on comments from the panel here, I'm curious if there's a perspective on how your teams are thinking about the right thresholds. Jackie mentioned those thresholds need to be adaptable, need to change. But for teams sitting on this call, how should they think about like where is the starting point and how to evolve those over time?
It really varies. So for example, let's just use that COVID one since we brought it up. Before, if you had a restaurant, we didn't care what your credit was. You could have the worst credit in the world. You could have a bankruptcy. We didn't care because you're card present. Somebody comes, they pay for their food, they get their food, they go home. It's very, very low credit risk. So before it was just like you could have whatever credit, didn't care. You were getting approved. And then now, not only are we getting a lot of changes to that, a lot of them are card not present now, and they're starting to commit more and more fraud. So instead of having no limit to credit, now we're saying, okay, just kidding. Maybe you need above 600. I don't know. I'm just making it up. And just being able to change those thresholds depending on your risk level is good. So I think that question really depends on what is your risk level? What are you seeing? A lot of times we'll take a look at our losses. We have weekly loss calls and monthly loss calls to go over the different types of trends that we're seeing and see where we need to kind of button up in certain areas because they are trends and they do change over time. So like I said, sometimes you'll see maybe a car wash. You wouldn't think a car wash is risky, but every now and then we'll have one. It'll pop up a ring of them. We'll say like, oh, they'll just open one after another. And then, oh, Jackie's fraud. Let's close Jackie. Oh, Mike opens the same location, but it's a different one. It's different, right? And then he ends up doing fraud too. And then they close that one. So it's always having to manage that. So it's curious just to see what you can. So we can change it based off of the MCC, the credit exposure, the volume they might be doing. Are they a startup? Are they less than 6 months old? A fun one for us that always seems to pop up is, okay, we'll get a brand new miscellaneous, either like business consulting that's super generic, or it'll be like they'll build websites or they'll do tech support. And it's like an 88-year-old female. And you're like, yeah, can you? Yes, but is it likely an 88-year-old will know how to do websites and they want to do that? Probably not. So that's usually a really good indicator is, does this fit the target, audience for this type of activity or not? Sometimes you can go off of that though, and sometimes you can't, because like I said, maybe somebody's grandma is really with it and maybe they just, maybe you see that they just got they just graduated from MIT, I don't know, for that particular thing. So it's like, could they? Yes. But are they likely to? No. So it's like, again, do you want to solve for edge cases or do you want to solve for ones? But that really just depends on where you've seen risk before, and the more data that you can utilize, the better.
Yeah, I agree. For me, because we focus on, decline recovery. So it's a little different than the payment side I've been on for the last 7 years, but it's where's the volume spiking. So I can have one UBO who has then 15 URLs, but then running through one mid. So ensuring that that mid is remaining healthy and that like we're watching refunds, we're watching chargebacks, we're watching retry logic. It's very crucial in the first 30 days to have a healthy like portfolio on that mid. especially in this sort of decline recovery space that I'm in.
Yeah, I think picking up on kind of both of the comments there, I think generally where we're seeing kind of the holy grail, or where we think the market is really heading, is trying to combine a lot of the transaction-based signals with the merchant behavior. So I think that's where we've seen this kind of sweet spot to say, does it all make sense? Does the actual behavior and the combination and the profile with the data TrueBiz is providing add up to say, like, I love Jackie's example of a grandma providing tech support at 85 years old is quite unlikely. And if you combine that with, what Nicole mentioned, transaction history, chargeback history, you can start to build a pretty complete picture on what that is, that merchant is representing. That is very difficult to automate standalone. So that's kind of generally, I think, where we see, the market moving and what we've been experimenting with quite a bit. All right. There's a sort of a question in the chat sort of related to this around a question from Kathy. The biggest risks, what are the biggest risks that firms should really look for when trying to automate more, particularly around this decision quality and oversight? I think is also kind of an interesting topic. How do you think about automation, decision quality, and oversight? It's a question from Kathy.
I'm actually going to take that one and roll it into the question Eric Cintron asked. And I am curious, Eric Cintron is the name of my old boss when I was in underwriting. So I'm curious if that's the same guy. If it is, hello, welcome. Good to see you again. If not, nice to meet you. But anyway, this one is really good because, with heavily using AI, especially depending on, which one you're using, because there are so many, there's Claude, there's Chat GPT, there's Copilot. So it's like, which one do you use and which one is better in different cases? And how can you tell if something is real or not? So you may see the industry move towards something what we call KYA, know your agent. So you may have like agentic e-commerce. So like, oh yeah, let me tell this thing to say, oh, whenever these t-shirts fall below this price, go ahead and buy 500 of them. So how do you do that? How does that AI agent know if that website is real or not? A lot of that lies in the metadata of the websites themselves. And that's something that TrueBiz checks, which we really enjoy. So different things like, and Danny, feel free to interrupt, but different things like how long is a merchant or how long is a person spending on a website? Do they fill out the entire thing in 2 seconds, which is probably a robot, or are they spending 8 minutes per page? Like, how long are they doing this? How long does it take them to type out something? And where is the traffic coming from? Where are those different people registered in? Are these links to, oh yeah, Jackie's in Atlanta, but oh, I see this one is happening over in Singapore. Jackie doesn't live in Singapore. How do we know this is real? And how do we know Jackie's not traveling? So then you kind of have to see, like, are these, true transactions from the person? Does it make sense, or does it fall outside of that? And to a degree, sometimes you're going to have mistakes because AI is getting better and better. And then sometimes you're having to kind of manage that. But it is really cool to see that. And that is part of what we take a look at. Like, are these fake websites? And, how many of them do they have? A lot of times the fake websites will have the same templates as others. So they're sometimes easy to identify. And then sometimes the person just doesn't really know what they're doing. And then they just use a generic template generator. And then maybe they are a real business, but they're startups. So you always have to manage that. So it is something that, even though everything is moving towards AI, I do think we're always going to have that human in the loop to check for errors, check for different things. And then, if there are hallucinations within the model, you have to have kind of that double checking and what I like to call an anomaly detector. So is anything falling outside of your normal? So if you see this trend is happening and this is how you normally see things, especially with your transaction monitoring, okay, what is happening that is outside of that pattern? Because even with AI, they have patterns too, because they were designed by humans. So you'll see that each AI has different things that they like to say. For example, I use Chat GPT a lot. I love to write stories just for fun, because they get to end however I want them to end. So maybe I'll rewrite the notebook the way it should have ended. I don't know. So Chat GPT a lot of times will say, that lands, he's doing this and that land. So you'll see different things that will appear that are from these things, or you'll see something is misspelled a certain way all the time. Maybe they use the English spelling versus the American spelling of a name using an S instead of a Z. So you have different indicators that you can kind of rely on for that. And we'll have like different lists that says, if you see this phrase repeated more than once or something, go ahead and refer this out. So it's always tricky to manage that because AI can adapt faster than we can. But like I said, it's always fun to see what patterns the AI themselves have.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off of what Jackie said, when we started using TrueBiz and a combination of some other vendors, you can sort of create like a pattern and apply that to your use case. So like example, if I'm now using TrueBiz, I take that information and I apply that to my data. So if I know for example, this is a great one that we've used in the past, is if we know a merchant's been in business for less than 3 months, they're selling online clothing, and then we see that they're on a certain bank account and that they're also using a certain domain. I think it was like Hostinger as the provider, would be an auto decline, because that was based off the data we were getting in, is that all of it was turning into loss. And so taking the data that you get from these tools that you're using to help automate your flow and system, and then reacting to it in real time to come up with better logic.
Yeah, and then one other thing with TrueBiz for me, I come across situations where merchants will be selling online and they'll have processing history, let's say through Shopify, for example, but then TrueBiz is showing me they don't have any web traffic, and it's 100% internet. Yeah. So that's just one way, right? That's a little suspicious, right? I'm gonna have to ask some questions about that. That's just one way TrueBiz helps us. It's very handy with the e-commerce merchants. And in relation to, we talked about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is awesome. I use it for my business purposes, but also for personal purposes too. How do I make dinner tonight, right? But on the business side, I mean, yeah, we're using it all the time. But I kind of stress, like, hey, you can't just make your decision based on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a good source, right? This is just like all these other different sources that we have, right? It's good, it's helpful, but don't just solely make your decision just based on AI.
Yep. Because I feel like a lot of times, this is just a random example pulled out of my head. It's going to be accurate to a degree. You can assume that it'll do 80% of the work, but maybe 20% you'll still have to do. And then you'll have to check if some of the things are accurate, like recipes. Sometimes it does great, and sometimes it's just like, there should not be salt in a cake, but maybe a little bit. I don't know. So you'll just have to double check that. But depending on, the check that you're looking at, it can be pretty wild. But one of the things that we like to look at is maybe the AI will say, okay, well, Jackie's updated her address 10 times. And because 9 of these are at this address over here, that's probably her address. Can we assume that that is accurate? We don't know. Maybe I moved yesterday and I just updated my driver's license. I wanted to do it real quick. I went to the DMV the very next day. And now that is my address. I have a brand spanking new address. But maybe ChatGPT says, that's only 1 out of 10. So that's not enough for us to say that this is truly that. So then you kind of have to look at where the source of information is coming from. So one requirement that I have on everything that we do and use is that it has to be auditable. So it has to provide a trail of where did you get this information? And then we come up with kind of like a scorecard on, okay, if you got this off of Google, may or may not be accurate. If you got this off of the IRS database or the DMV website or, whatever source, then it probably is accurate. So you kind of take those and have, we have different models and different risk engines that we deploy to say like how much we care about something. So you can give it a different weight, right? How much do I care about where Jackie lives? A lot. How much do I care about where Jackie eats? Probably not a lot. So you can take those different things and weigh it out. So how much do you care about credit? How much do you care about, the date of birth, like whatever it is. Some are required checks, like I said, and then some are just nice to haves. So it's definitely something that you can take a look at. And that's something you can always adjust, right? Like I said, it's very important to make sure that you can change those factors as you go on, because, things may change. Right now, like I said, 6 years ago at this point, card present restaurants, not a big deal. But now most of them are card not present. So being able to say, okay, when you shift from this to this, if it's 20% card not present, then I care about it. I don't know. Whatever those factors are, you can base that off of your transactional data.
Right. So really just to kind of put a bow on this sort of high level topic of how do you think about what to automate versus review. I think a lot of what I've heard is that it's not really necessarily about automating everything, even though that might be the ideal world. It sounds more like the panel here is saying, try to be intentional about where automation works. Triage those like best cases and worst cases. The thing is a really good segue into the kind of the final topic of today's panel, really talking about like how do you scale the team around that challenge. So I think yeah, go ahead, Nicole. I was going to kind of tag you in on this kind of this final topic on how do you think about analysts triaging analyst capacity today and going forward.
Yeah, so when it comes to like designing a scalable like risk team, I think triage is more important than automation. So if your queue is wrong, then everything downstream is inefficient. So how do you triage effectively? Start with segmentation. So like break your merchants into tiers if you can. So like low risk, medium, and high. Then MCC and the vertical risk, the billing model, the sales channel it's coming from. Is it direct? Is it third party? Triage based on off uncertainty, not just risk. Kill bad submissions up front. So if you can do the auto decline, that's great. But that means enforcing minimum data requirements. So like make sure that they're submitting a live website. There is a clear product and pricing page on there, the working checkout page, valid bank information. A lot of the triage problems are actually intake problems. And then route the work by skill level, which has worked really well for me in the past. So have a junior analyst that can handle low risk, mid-level structured, and then have your senior analyst that can do high exposure, but also then can do complex verticals. So Nutra, peptides, I know that it's the hype right now, CBD, adult gun. So that's kind of how I view triaging effectively for me.
Nailed it, Nicole. Couldn't have said it better.
Maybe again, maybe there's another question for Nicole. I think there is a wide, like you've worked with large teams, small teams, new teams, tenured teams. How do you maybe think about those differently? Like, how does that process evolve depending on like the size and the nature of the company?
Yeah. So, I mean, as of like versus now versus where was it before or?
We can keep it high level. We don't need to name names, but yeah, curious maybe on the difference in sizes.
Yeah, and so by that, sorry, just elaborate a little bit more so I understand correctly.
How do you focus a small underwriting team differently from a big, large team going forward?
Yeah, so if you have a small team, everyone on your small team, I mean, obviously you want to have like a senior person, but if I have a small right now, I have me and someone else right now that are underwriting deals. That's it. And so everything that she knows is what I want, is what I know, is what I'm teaching her. When you have a large team, you want to be able to scale that team. So like I said, you want to have like your junior analyst, your mid, and then like your like senior and your high level up ones. And spreading across like the deals that come in, the volume, who can I trust that can do like these low risk retail card present deals? Who can I trust can do the high risk level ones that have the experience doing that? But when you're at a smaller company where there's like, take for where I'm at right now, there's just me and another girl. We're doing it all together. I don't care how much experience she has. I will help teach her and I will train her. But when you have a larger company and there's more people on your team, you have 20 plus underwriters, you can definitely start to then like break that into groups and then start finding out who has like that special niche, like who can be the Nutra person, who can handle travel, and Mike's done a great job at Kurv with his specialized risk team with their verticals.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have kind of like Nicole was talking about, having your underwriters, your niche underwriters, your underwriters who focus on retail business. You get a lot of familiarity with the deals that you're reviewing, right? If I'm always looking at e-commerce neutral merchants, I can pick up on trends.
Yeah.
I can decision them faster, right? So it's important to have your underwriters segmented based on the type of business it is, those kind of things.
Yeah, and I want to
Great.
add a sassy answer to that. You should chase the
Please.
money there too, because my brain, like, I love fraud. So my brain wants to say, oh, we need more fraud analysts because they need to find it, right? But the reality is we don't make money off of fraud accounts. So you just want to have a few people that can specialize in that, identify it quickly, shut it down. And then you can really focus your energy on, like I said, automating both ends of it so that when you do have people, they can focus on accounts that are going to make you money. So if you have, different types of accounts that statistically are bad for you, like solar panels are, you probably don't want to focus on, let's hire a bunch of people for this. But if you have ones where nutraceuticals, maybe there's a lot of them, maybe you have a partner of yours that's all they do and they get you a ton of money, then they're kind of worth that investment. So for us, it's, we definitely have to manage the onboarding and how do we increase revenue, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just approve everything? Because the reality is, if we did that, then you would bleed out a lot of money on the back end. So part of the trick is, where do we make money? Where do we not make money? How do we eliminate or reduce the amount of accounts where we don't make a lot of money? How do we increase the ones that we do? So, and that's part of that communication with sales, like Nicole said, that is critical, because sales doesn't want to waste their time, right? They're busy. They just want to sell. They want to make money. Time is money, right? So when you tell sales like, hey, stop getting me these grandmas or whatever, because they're all fraud. Start getting me more of this fruit salesman over here. I don't know. I'm making it up. But
Yeah.
it's just like, where you're making that money, that's where you want to chase. You don't want to spend a ton of time on accounts that are not going to be profitable for you, even if they're fun to look at.
And with peptides being like the hype right now, like a lot of it has to be like legit script certified, but if your portfolio can take it, you can, and I recommend like slowly turning the faucet on if you want to bring on peptide merchants or other high risk verticals, if it makes sense. You have to make sure that you make money as well, and that like you can sustain it, and so that they're not, and that the people that are submitting those deals, they can cover the fines, they can cover the fees, but make sure that the pricing is priced really fat. So like if you're doing a peptide deal and it might not be like legit script certified, but it's priced at like 8 or 9 basis points. Like take it if you can, because if that person can cover like the losses or whatever you get on that, I highly recommend it. But yeah, it has to make sense for your portfolio, like what Jackie said.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. And then to hit on your low, medium, high risk, like we charge extra if you're a high risk account. So
Yeah.
we do tolerate them because we do make a good bit off of them.
yeah, to some degree, risk is a pricing decision more than anything else. And then really kind of a final question here. I'm curious, like all of the panel have been in this space for a very long time. Like, how have you seen the underwriter or the analyst role evolve? And maybe what's your prediction on what that role looks like in the years ahead?
So when I started out in underwriting, a deal would come into my inbox and I would take the application, I would add it in as I was adding into my system, and then I would manually run match, I would manually run IRS, I would manually pull credit, I would then manually key the deal in. So all of that's kind of gone now, right? You have now automation doing that stuff for you. You're still then trying to then react to like all this fake stuff and all this AI stuff that you're getting back and all these bad actors out there, because the really good ones are really hard to catch. So what I kind of see the transition is more on enhanced reporting, um, or not AI, but like enhanced logic into like the decisions you make. You can have like all these different risk scores, but if you have all these different vendors, but it's not all connecting, then that's like where you have to then make your own decision. So that's where it's changed for me. I have all these people giving me inputs and like, oh, well, this is a 10 score or this is a fail. But then it's like, I then have to then take all that and make my own decision. That's what's changed a lot for me.
Yeah. Just to
Yep.
touch on that. Yeah, for Kurv here, It wasn't long ago, believe it or not, where we had our merchant applications were in vanilla folders, right? And we would underwrite the folders, stamp them, approve. Luckily, we don't live in that world anymore. We're complete digital. And you know, back in the day, you would run a match report, you would run a credit report, and not too many other things. Now today we run, you could be 10 different reports. You have 10 different vendors that you're running reports on, and which is great. Now, the one thing is all these reports are great, all these vendors are great, but the underwriters need to know how to read these reports. They need to know what they're looking at. So there's a lot more education that needs to happen for these underwriters to understand what they're looking at and help them decision the application. You know, so yeah, I think that's a big part of being an underwriter also, is not just looking at the merchant, but you know, understanding all this different information you're getting from all your different partners.
Yeah. And then for us, it went from very manual to automated to now we're introducing AI and we're still figuring out that balance of AI. I think that's probably true for a lot of companies. Like a lot of companies may have introduced AI, but it's not really giving them the benefits they thought it would. So now it's, okay, how do we use AI effectively? And that looks different for all the different verticals.
Excellent. So I know we are coming up on time, so just wanted to thank everyone. This has really been a great discussion. I think if I had to try to summarize a few things that,
Darn it.
yeah, it is over. It's over. The fun has to stop, unfortunately.
Wait, though, Danny, can I just add what I just forgot to say? I wanted to add this though. For
Go
anyone
ahead.
that doesn't know this about TrueBiz, one of the really cool tools, and I know it will get even better, is if you are running a URL and you get the result, you can chat with the AI agent inside, so you can ask it questions around that business. And I just think that's a great add-on feature. And I just wanted to give it credit.
All right, appreciate that, Nicole. Yeah, I mean, I'll try and recap. I think has been a really interesting discussion. I think a few themes that stand out. One is that friction is inevitable in this process. I think it mostly matters where and how you apply it. I think the other kind of theme, I think it was Nicole who mentioned, like sometimes triage is more important than automation, which I think is probably one of the things we've seen a lot in the past few years on automations really working best with strong and intelligent triage. And I think the best teams that we work with, that we see across the industry, are designing both for speed and for control from the start. So I think those are kind of some of the sections that will come out. You know, we're going to share the kind of recording and a bit of a write-up from our perspective, but we'll also want to take the time to thank the panelists, Nicole, Jackie, Mike. Really appreciate you sharing your perspectives. And for everyone joining, there's obviously the problem that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So if you're interested in continuing the conversation, feel free to reach out. And thanks everyone for joining. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.